Some of you guys have asked me to do a brief overview on the Escapes of what I'm looking for whenever I'm inspecting things. So this is a 16 Escape with a 1.6 liter. This customer did have a few complaints. She said I have a leaking rear CV axle. The vehicle is like less than 400 miles away from ESP going out. And luckily they caught it when they did, because the CV axle is starting to get wet, so that will be taken care of for them. The bearing is making some noise when I test drive, so whenever I replace this CV axle here, which is a through CV axle, you have enough room to get in there and take all the inverted Torx bolts out, and the sleeve, after you get everything apart and the wheel bearing out, the CV axle will slide through the hub. So this is not a hard one to do. This is actually pretty decent. It can be a bear to get the bearing out sometimes, but that's here nor there. Really, these shocks need to be done. I mean, they're all flaked off and rotted all the way down. They're still holding pressure, nothing's leaking, and it looks like it's more surface than anything. If it was me, I would change these, but most of the customers, they decline if they're not leaking. They just don't, they won't do it. So I start, in specific areas, and I just check everything. I'll grab like my toe links and stuff like this, and I'll grab and I'll actually pull up and down on them to see if they're actually clanking, if anything's wore out inside this ball. And if it's not, I'm good. Typically when you're going over bumps and stuff like that, you'll hear these little sockets wear out. They'll tap 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 tap. This one doesn't seem to be popping. This is also flaking off here. I mean, really, I'm gonna recommend them anyway, just because they're so rotten from like halfway up. All the paint's coming off, and you can see water tracking and stuff, where like water and stuff's been getting in there and eating away at that. 9 times out of 10 they won't replace them. I'll check for any kind of leaks, any kind of weird stuff out of place, big holes or anything in the exhaust while I'm in the back of it. I've got a habit of touching things. I like to touch things, and I like to, just as I'm walking around subconsciously, like I won't even realize I'm doing it, I'll just be tapping and touching stuff to see if there's any abnormal sounds. So again, brake pads, these are newer pads and rotors here, so they have like 8 millimeter thickness, if not closer to 10 millimeter thickness. So pads and rotors in the rear are new. The tires are newer. They get like 30 seconds, I think. Something like 10. Bushings and stuff, just kind of as you're going around, make sure nothing's rolled out. Make sure you can push on them and pull them, and there's no excessive play. Just kind of, this is how I do all the Escapes, and never really have problems with these rear sway bars. Don't see anything abnormal. I always look for like missing studs and bolts, things of this nature, because sometimes it'll be down and it'll be tapping whenever they hit bumps. This one is not tapping yet, but it probably will soon, because they like to wear out. The nuts come off, they rust off, fall apart. Just as I'm going, looking for anything that's out of place. Kind of going underneath, just peeking everywhere. I'll grab the bottom of the tire and I'll yank it in and out. One hand on the outside, one hand on the inside, and just jerk the tire back and forth to make sure I'm not seeing any play in these lower ball joints, because they very easily go bad on these. I do have a video replacing these, so you guys can always go back and check that. The pads up front I already checked. They're about 4 to 5 mil, and I marked it down as yellow, saying that they probably could be serviced soon. They still got some life in them, but nothing I'd be too extremely confident on running the rest of the year. But who knows, people do what they want at that point. I mean, I can't change. I always look for fluid buildup here on the back, on the CV axle where it goes into the wheel bearing. I'll look for any kind of rust tracking or buildup to where something could potentially be blocking, sensor, something, whatever may be on the back of these hubs. I'm always checking brake lines to make sure nothing's leaking, especially at the part where the rubber line goes into this here, as well as any kind of tracking that may be around the brake caliper. I don't see anything. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a nice tug in and out here, and then I'm gonna actually grab the tire center mass up here And I'm going to check the in and out on the outer tie rod end and the inner tie rod end, make sure I got no popping. So I got the lower cover hanging down. It was just a bunch of T27s all the way around. And then there is one little 7mm on each side right here in the plastic, but this one was missing. So I'll take one from my box and throw it back in there. When I go over the engine, I'll start at the front of the engine here and I'll kind of look and I'll see what does my belt look like. Give it a pull, make sure my tensioner, if it does have a tensioner, so this one does, you can kind of see it right there. Make sure that it's moving freely and it's not close to being bound up. If you look at the top corner, all the way up there in the corner, there's a little notch. Yeah, right there. And I try to make sure that that notch up there where that tensioner's moving is not bottomed out on its stop. You see how it's moving right there? Up there in the corner? I make sure that that metal is not touching the other piece of metal. And then I look at the integrity of the belt, which here looks to be pretty good. So the belt doesn't have any sheen to it. It's got nice ribs to it, no cracking or anything. Now look, front cover, front crank seal and stuff like that. Looks like this has actually been resealed. I wonder if this is one of the ones that I did. You'll see on some of the EcoBoost engines, the 1.5 liters, it'll have a secondary pump right here. It's part of the cooling system. This is a 1.6 liter, it doesn't have it, but I'll check for leaks around that pump and stuff. Then I'll follow my tubing from my intercooler up here and just kind of follow it back to the turbo. Turbo looks, they went on some kind of road trip because it's got like red clay type material all over the place, like real sandy, like they were down in Louisiana. Turbo's good, doesn't look like anything's leaking. I don't see any filled up oil buildup around the seals, which is not a huge indication that something's wrong, but it could be one. Looking at my PTU here, it does have 74,000 miles on it, so I'm going to recommend that it be serviced, but this is one of the easy PTUs to service. So literally, drain plug, let's see what it looks like. It looks like a T40 or T45. Let's see real quick. This is the first one I grabbed. This is a 47. Not a 47. Let's try a 50. Yeah, it's a 50. So it's a T50. So you drain here and then you fill from the side right here. And I think the one on the side is a 40. Let me check. So drain here on this one and you fill here until it's level. Let it come out and then let it completely stop draining before you put the plug back in. You want it to be completely level with this fill hole right here. And the PTU takes 75-140 weight gear oil. This PTU does 75-140 gear oil. And while we're down here, there's your drain plug for your trans, and then here's your fill plug back here by the CV axle. This is like an Allen. It's like a 50. I don't know if it's an, or no, it's like an H10 or an H12, I think, back here. And then this down here, pretty sure is like a 10 or 11 millimeter. And it's Mercon LV, and it's right at about 4.5 quarts for the transmission when you drain and then fill. Procedure is to crack the plug up top, let it breathe, crack the plug in the bottom, let it drain, and then once it's done draining, put the plug back in, tighten it up, and then fill from the top until it starts to come out and let it stop coming out. Put your plug back in, start the vehicle, run it for a while it's running, pull the plug back out and make sure that it's level with the hole. Normally 4.5 quarts, 4.3, 4.5 quarts, you're right on the money. There's no going back and topping it off. And this here only holds about I think it's less than, I think it's like 0.6 or 0.7 of a quart of 75 140. It doesn't hold very much at all. You can see at one time something was leaking here, and it ain't leaking anymore, so who knows what it was or where it was coming from. Somebody either sealed something up or there's no fluid left in there at all. Who knows? Let's see if they give me the time to actually do the service on it. They probably won't, but we'll see. And then kind of look up here, the oil cooler and stuff. The oil cooler's not leaking. Oh, I did say we will find out what plug. Pretty sure it's this 45. No, it's gonna be a 50 as well. So it's a 50 here and then a 50 up here. Yep, it's a 50. So that's the basic inspection down low. Just continue on with your piping. Make sure everything's good. This is charge air cooler piping. Okay, make sure your PCM box is tight and snug in there. So that's good. Make sure none of the bottom of the radiator or anything's wet as you come across here. That all looks good. Check your CV axle over here at the trans. Make sure nothing's leaking. That's good. Take a peek at the back of your hub and everything. Make sure there's no excessive buildup or anything on the tone ring. Go ahead and grab your sway bar and push up and down really hard. And make sure that these aren't clanking, because over bumps, you may have a good sway bar, like you may think you have a good sway bar, but you hit a bump or something like that, and these like the tap, 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 tap inside here, they're notorious for going out. Same thing on this side, grab it, move it up and down. It ain't tapping or anything like that. You can get a peek at your turbo lines and stuff. Make sure your drain line is not leaking. Doesn't look like there's any coolant lines leaking at the turbo. Everything looks good. So at this point, we'll put the vehicle down, put the shield back on, and do an inspection from the top. Another thing I forgot too is I forgot to mention, check your diff seal as well. Make sure there's nothing leaking. Make sure your rear cover's not leaking. These don't typically leak in these Escapes. I mean, every once in a while you might see one, but it's not common for it to leak. So good thing we were coming under here and we're doing all this anyway, because I'm not gonna lie, I missed that. I didn't even see that was leaking right there. So this is 80/90 fluid in this rear diff, and you have like your drive unit and then your actual diff. It's like the drive unit here and then the diff here, and they literally just pull this whole assembly out in one piece and put it back in whenever they. So there is a drain plug, and then there's a fill plug. Okay, so there it is right there. It's like a 3/8 drive, and then actually on the bottom there is a plug you can pull. It shows. There's a fill. Where the hell's that thing at? So I take it back. That one on the side is the drain plug. It's been a long time since I did one of these. I've been working on all damn Explorers. But that plug right there is a drain plug, and the fill plug, it says, it's right there. Right on the other side of this. So that's the inspection underneath. Remember, 80/90 for the rear diff fluid, and it's only like 0.53 liters or something that it holds out, or something like that. A quart of 80/90 would be more than sufficient. Next thing would be going through and just kind of looking over everything, making sure I don't see any fluid. Popping the engine cover up. It's actually a pretty clean motor. Man. How you get this airbox apart is 8 mil, 8 mil, 8 mil. There's 8 mil right there. Be careful, because most of the time when you take it apart and put it back together, you will split it, unless you're very careful. How you check your air filter. Don't see any leaks anywhere. Everything looks good. Looks like somebody's been in here, did some kind of temporary repair. Broke the tab off trying to change their light. They must park this outside a lot by trees or something. Then next you just do your basic stuff, your light check, your windshield wipers, all those. But I don't need to go through that stuff with you guys. That's stuff you can do on your own. I don't have to do that. You know, check oil and stuff like that while you're here. You can pull the cover off the battery. Check your battery connections. There's your ground post for jump starting. The regular post back there. These typically don't corrode up. I mean, overall the vehicle's in really good shape. It's got a couple minor things that have to be addressed, but nothing big. Well, that's it, guys. I'm gonna wrap this up. That's 17 minutes too long for some of you. I appreciate it. Really nothing else we can cover right now other than take it for a road test and listen for humming sounds and stuff at the wheels. Check your brakes, make sure all that stuff's good, like we talked about when we were down there. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys.